Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, babies in their diapers, welcome to the Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.
That's me, Tiberius.
And welcome to the Tiberius Show today. And I'm your host, Tiberius Boy. And as always, we're looking at various jobs and how they affect the world around us. Today's guest is going to be very interesting. We're going to talk to a freelance journalist who also works in corporate communications. Do you have any idea what a freelance journalist does? Well, neither do I. So, let's find out. Let me introduce our next guest, the one, the only, the amazing Ted Johnson.
Hello. What can I do?
There.
What can I do?
Thank you for being on the show.
There you go.
Okay, so you are listed as a freelance journalist. I know a journalist writes news stories, so does freelance mean you don't get paid?
No, freelance is not. I do get paid. I don't work unless I do get paid. What it means is I just don't work for one entity or one publication. I work for several. Now, I used to work for one publications, or newspapers, magazines, and now even corporate entities. But freelance just means I call up people that I know and say, do you want a story on this? Do you want a story on that? Or they call me and say, you got to cover this, you got to cover that. And it's a per piece basis is how it goes. I always get paid. I wouldn't do it if I don't get paid.
Okay, so you started with the newspaper. Well, what did you report on?
Well, I started because I played a lot of sports and fell naturally into sports. So from the very beginning, I covered high school games, even Little League games. And I grew into the bigger sports. Then I helped cover the 49ers, and I backed up baseball games, which means I did backup beat work, which means I went to games every week. And then it was just, features. As a sports editor, I was in charge of building a staff and then creating a look for the newspaper and then what we wanted to cover. And that was very successful. Won awards. But the best thing about the newspaper job is that you're part of the community and you have your name next to your work and people get to know you.
Wow, very interesting. So just in case kids don't know, what exactly is a newspaper?
Yeah, what is a newspaper? There used to be this thing that showed up every day in your doorstep. It was usually wrapped by itself with just a rubber band, but if it was raining, they put it in plastic, and someone put it in a truck, and then someone delivered it to somebody's house, who either drove or biked their way through the neighborhood, and they threw it on your front porch or your lawn or whatever, and you went out in the morning and picked it up, and you read about the prior day's news, everything from what the president said to how the local high school football team did, to box scores, and even comics and games in the comics section. It was a great one place to see a lot of the news in one place.
That's very cool. So this was like being a reporter, but not on the radio or TV. But how is it different?
Well, radio and TV people work for smaller segments, whereas print newspapers, they tend to be more in depth. They have more time, they have more space to get deeper into the story. You get deeper into a person's character or more background to a story. Instead of a news story being on your news for 90 seconds, we can write 1,000 words. Sometimes we write 2,000 words, and that's a lot of space. But you can explain a lot. You can give a lot more context. You can give the benefit of both sides, even 3 sides or 4 sides to a story. So it's very educational.
Okay, so how long have you been doing this?
I started this 40 years ago.
Wow. So when did you know that this was the job for you?
I always knew I wanted to write. I always wanted to be a writer. My dad was a teacher, but he always emphasized education and reading and communications. And
Nice.
so that just developed into wanting to be a writer. And I started by writing letters to girls when I was in high school. That's how I started my style.
Okay, so now, did you get to decide what you could write about, or were you told by a supervisor?
Generally speaking, you had areas of coverages. So if you have to cover a local team, you focus on the local team.
Okay.
But as a general reporter, you often get told to go things like, hey, there was a break-in at so-and-so business, go cover it. Oh, and tonight there's a planning commission meeting, you got to go cover that, and you got to give deadlines, and you got to meet specific time of your work and length of your work to make the deadline. And that was the job. That's what makes the job fun and challenging at the same time.
Sounds like tough work, man.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, when I was covering the 49ers, we had a Monday night game. The games would end at 9 p.m. Local time. And my deadline was 11 o'clock. So I had to go down out of the press box, onto the field, into the clubhouse, talk to the players, and walk back to the elevator, get back into the press box, fire up my small laptop computer. It was called a TRS-80 by Radio Shack, one of the worst things ever invented. 8 lines of text, and write 3 stories about, I'd say you have to write about 1,200 words in not much more than an hour and get it sent in.
Wow.
So that was the challenge.
And get
it's
it
called
sent
deadline
in?
pressure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's deadline pressure.
Okay, so my dad said you went from the newspaper to different magazines. Now, how was that different?
Oh, but magazines are great. I love magazine work because you have more time to do the story. At the time, magazines were more flush with money, so you had to do more things like travel. And so you can really develop a style and get deeper into the story and kind of be more creative and more nuanced into your writing. Newspapers tend to be very fact-based, straightforward, not a lot of colorful writing, whereas magazines, the one I worked for anyway, allowed you to put in much more of a personal style and get your voice out, your personal voice, and how you felt about the subject.
Okay. So, what's the best part about being a journalist?
Just that. You get to go talk to people or see events, travel, and then expect to perform. And then you have your name on it when it comes out, either the next day in a newspaper or the next month or 3 months, depending on the deadline of a magazine. So you have your name next to it. People say, "Oh, did you do that?" And you say, "Yeah." Then there are people in the street say, "Hey, you got my son's name wrong," which has happened. And you do your best to get as accurate as possible and create the truth as close as possible to what you can determine. And that's the hard part, is getting everything accurate on time.
Now, did you have to travel all over to get the story?
Well, not all over, but I did get able to travel for a couple magazines. Yes, I traveled to Australia twice, South Africa twice, Thailand and Vietnam. But I've also doing my coverage working in golf. I've been to Scotland, been to France, been to Mexico, all over Mexico.
Wow.
So that's for some of the benefits, obviously, is you get to travel. I've also turned down trips to Turkey and Malaysia. So it's all a matter of balance, really. Because when I have young kids and my wife is working, it's hard to tell her that I'm going to be gone in Turkey for 10 days and can you take care of the kids?
Wow. So what's the most misunderstood part about being a journalist?
That we're lazy, that we grift off other people, that we print whatever we want without justification. It's, generally speaking, journalists are a very conscientious group who try their best to understand a story and present it in a concise, understandable, balanced way.
Okay. So how does being a journalist make the world a better place?
Well, without journalism, I mean, you wouldn't know anything that was going on. I mean, our country was founded on a free journalistic system, the free press, where you're allowed to print whatever you want to print, and you're allowed to say whatever you want to say. And it was the transparency of government, the transparency of laws, legislation that formed the foundation of our country. And people from Benjamin Franklin on knew that respected, independent press corps is the key to an effective democracy.
Okay. Now, here seems like a good time to take a quick commercial break. Let's hear a word from our sponsors.
There you go.
So you want to make an ad for your company, right?
Yeah, Tiberius, you want to help me?
Okay, so what's the name of the company?
PPWND.
PP what?
Professional Pressure Washing and Detailing.
So you like clean driveways?
Yeah, like that. We pressure wash commercial buildings and semi-truck and trailers.
So how would someone get a hold of you?
They can visit my site at ppwnd.com or call me at 407-900-7793.
So I just tell them to call you at 407-900-7793 or visit ppwnd.com?
Yeah, Tiberius, you got it.
Cut, that's a wrap. Just use that.
Oak Ridge Gun Range is a family-oriented shooting range that has been in business for over 30 years. They specialize in basic firearm training and offer numerous services such as consignments, gun trades, gunsmithing, and concealed weapon classes. I even got my training for gun safety at Oak Ridge Gun Range. Great customer service, and firearm safety is what they do best. So find out more at oakridgegunrange.com.
And we're back here talking with Ted Johnson. He is a freelance journalist and a corporate communication specialist. So, Ted, what's the hardest part about being a journalist?
Well, there are several aspects that can be the hardest part or the most difficult part. Usually, it comes down to getting people to talk. Something happened, but somebody's protecting something or something's holding something up. Somebody doesn't want to hurt anyone in the public domain, so they won't say what happened. So that's the key thing. And so as a journalist, your job isn't to get them to talk first. It's actually get them to trust you. And when they trust you, they'll kind of open up and you can eventually get to what they say happened. So that's usually the hardest part. Some journalists are magical at it, and other journalists are antagonistic and not very good at it. Other than that, the mere performance of when I was a newspaper journalist, you were just on deadline all the time. So now it's even worse because of the websites. When I talk to my people who still write sports, their deadline is constant because they want to get it up on the website as fast as possible. Whereas before, if I got a story at 1 o'clock in the morning, I could wait until the next day to write it up because the deadline wasn't until 11 o'clock the next day, 11 p.m. the next day. So in today's world, they get a story. Somebody calls them 1 o'clock in the morning with the story. They have to get it up on the paper, in the website right away. So that can be draining, to say the least.
Okay. So is being a freelance journalist harder or easier than working for a regular publication?
I prefer to work for a steady, financially sound publication. Yes, because I like the money. I like the stability of it all. Freelance, you have to hunt down work. There's 3 parts. You have to get the job, you have to do the job, and then you have to get paid. And sometimes getting paid is the worst part of it all. But generally speaking, everybody I work with has been very good.
Okay. So what is that one event that you reported on that you will never forget?
Oh, there's so many. Man, I got stories. One event of, I don't know. How about a week-long event when I covered the 49ers in Miami in the Super Bowl, and for 7 nights I had 35 hours of sleep. And then the next year I covered them in New Orleans for 7 nights and had 38 hours of sleep. So I got 40 minutes a night more sleep when I was in New Orleans.
Wow.
I've interviewed everything. I've interviewed Tiger Woods. I've interviewed Gerald Ford, the former president. I interviewed actors. I did music reviews. You want to know a hard thing, Tiberius? I tell you what a hard thing is. And you first get thrown into a music review, and the second act you see is Weather Report in 1984. And they're at the Greek Theater in Berkeley, and they're making the most esoteric, unrelatable sounds in their jazz format. And I have no idea how I'm going to be able to relate that into print. That was a hard job.
Wow.
They were out there. But
Okay.
anyway, you worked it out. We worked it out.
So you talked that you're also a corporate communication specialist. Well, can you explain on what that means?
Well, basically what it means is it depends on what I did. So different companies, I did different things. I worked for a company called Ornite, which is a division of Chevron. And I put out a twice-a-year monthly magazine. So I interviewed people, talked about major projects, incidents that were coming up. And right after I joined, Katrina went over the top of their main plant outside New Orleans. So that was a big story and big part of the issue. So I did that for 5.5 years. And then after that, I worked for a company called Johnson & Johnson in their diabetes care. So I was putting out company related stories on the success of diabetes franchise around the world. I didn't know, for example, that India had a really undetected and very high diabetes rate. And the only reason they were number one is because they couldn't count all the people in China who had it. So you learn that diabetes is a very big problem in Saudi Arabia. So how we go about getting people to understand they need to do something about that was part of my job. So that was very good. Then I worked for a company called All Weather Insulated Panels. And what I did was most fun is because that was a building product. And so I helped put together a sales brochure. I put together ad pieces that looked like feature magazine pieces. I called up other trade magazines and got stories about the company in that I often wrote. So that was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I worked for a company called Cisco. I'm sorry for going on and on. But so it goes on and on. But there are different things all the time. So now I'm working with a graphic designer and we're putting together PowerPoint demonstrations when they go to, I don't know, the U.S. Army for Cisco does internet security issues, IT issues. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to make the offer the best way they can do it through this 30-slide PowerPoint presentation. So I did that.
So does every type of business need a communication specialist?
What's that?
Does every business need a communication specialist?
A lot of them do it. A lot of it outsource it. Some people do it themselves, depending on the size. Generally speaking, giant companies, they have, like, out here, we're a lot of the tech world is out here. So Meta or Facebook is so big, they have different divisions, and each one will have their own either communications or marketing team, and that's where the writing or the messaging comes from or gets processed into. So sometimes they contract it out to another company, and sometimes they have their own people. It all depends. But generally speaking, there was always something needed to be form of communication, whether it be written or website or even product. It's all done on through communications.
Okay, so, what's more fun, working for companies doing communications or working as a freelance journalist?
Working as a freelance journalist. Facebook didn't send me to Scotland for 10 days to go play golf.
Okay. Now, I know you because you've been, I guess, on the show that I work behind the scenes on. That show's about politics. Do you ever have to report on politics?
Yes. Well, in local politics, when I first started in a weekly, I had to cover planning boards or school board meetings. So they're definitely political because of people get voted on. People may remain on boards by being voted on, and that has a lot to do with how they vote on issues. So that's definitely political, as well as interviewing specialties. I interviewed a U.S. representative, Ron Dellums, came to our town one time. So generally speaking, yeah, everybody should have a touch of politics and dealing with the politicians and the leaders of the community.
So do you ever write for like blog sites or like publications that are on the web?
I've done some of the blogging. I do one of the jobs I had was direct communication with consumers for GoPro cameras. They would write in and ask questions about the products or what separates the products or why the product doesn't work, what to do about the product. And I had to become an expert on GoPro cameras through the help of everybody who worked at GoPro. So, that's pretty much any type of interaction with the public is a communication specialist, whether it be a PR specialist or just a writer or a journalist.
Okay. So do you ever have to deal with like angry readers?
Oh, all the time. Mothers calling up, complaining about their boyfriend, their son not getting a story written because they had 2 hits in the game and you didn't get written up. Little league mothers yelling at me because I had the audacity to report accurately on the game. But there's also stories I missed that I look back on and really regret. One was a female basketball player who turns out was being dated by her coach and I interviewed her for a long feature, and it didn't come up, and only really realized about it years later, and felt very bad about the fact that I didn't penetrate that veneer to kind of dig deeper, because I wouldn't have written about it, but I would have had to tell the school officials about it.
Yeah.
And I regret that.
So, did you look at the news differently since you know exactly how it's made?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Yeah, I think I do. I think I realize why sometimes people have to come from different angles and report certain things at certain times. Again, if you go back to broadcast or radio, listen to the quotes on a national broadcast radio, and you'll hear the quotes last 2 or 3 seconds. Whereas go on a website and you'll see 5, 6, 8 minute clips of people like the Rich Eisen show. So it all depends. You understand what they want. They want content, they want it fresh, and they want it lively. And so that's the big thing, is there's always a great demand for content. Always. They want what's going on. They want to fill the void.
Okay. So, what advice would you give to my listeners if they wanted to grow up and be a journalist?
Well, that's the problem. Good talks, long talks with friends of mine who used to be in the business, newspapers, magazines. It's really sad to see that the education of the readers has devolved from newspapers in a community sense and gone to websites where people do not get a real objective or balanced point of view on any local issue or national issue. And that's really sad. I think and so in that doing, for people who think about doing it, it's a great job. It's a great job for young people, because first thing, you have to do it. It's fun doing it. It's done meeting it. You feel good about seeing your name and the people say, hey, good job, Tiberius. Great read on that story. That's awesome. Great, what a follow up on that. And you know what, Tiberius? You can't get too excited because you got to do it again for tomorrow's paper. So that's really good. You can, you get immediate results on your work, and you get immediate feedback on your work. And that's very rare in the corporate world, because something that you do in a corporate world can get melded into something else, and it doesn't come out for 3 months and nobody really knows. So back to the point is, the problem is there's no newspapers anymore. There's no community newspapers anymore. There's a few national big ones. The Orlando Sentinel used to be one of the best newspapers in the country, and I think it comes out twice a week in Orlando now. And if that, and it probably has 1/5 the amount of journalists that work on it. So it's just sad to see that this amount of information that does not get reported goes by. And it's really sad.
Okay, well, on that note, let's take a quick break to pay some bills.
All right.
The Tiberius Show would like to thank one of their dedicated sponsors, Custom Designs Orlando. These guys are on Mills Avenue and do all sorts of stuff, ranging from photo ID badges, engraved signs, custom braille ADA signs, vinyl lettering to trophies and awards. The cool part about Custom Designs is they can ship products all over the United States. You can reach them at 407-898-0373 and tell them that
Tiberius
sent you.
Over 40 years, Lighthouse Central Florida has provided education, independent life skills, and job training to thousands of Central Floridians who live with blindness or any degree of vision loss. Whether it's picking out clothes in the morning or just moving around your community and serving Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties, contact Lighthouse Central Florida at 407-898-2483 or visit them online at lighthousecfl.org.
And we're back with freelance journalist Ted Johnson. So, Ted, have you ever thought about reporting about esports or video games?
Not really. It's probably just me. I actually have a daughter who works in PR on esports and video games. I don't find it interesting, to be honest with you. I think may sound a little harsh, maybe reflective of my generation, but spending 5 hours to play video games, what do you learn other than the combination of up, down, left, right, push hard, push left? Whereas if you spend 5 hours reading a book on Abraham Lincoln, you're going to read about Abraham Lincoln and what the country went through. So I kind of look down on esports. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
Well, I like talking about AI and how it can affect jobs. Do you think
There
AI
you
has a
go.
role to play to improve the job of being a journalist?
Oh, AI is very much on the horizon for this world, my world, very much so. People may be able to scan every story written on, let's say, a location or a golf course, and AI will scoop it up and reshape it and define it so it doesn't affect any copyright laws
Mm-hmm.
and print it. And they don't need me. And so that's very much a threat. I think it's also a big threat to like graphic artists. People make
Yes.
movie posters, for example. It's a big threat. Um, Big threat. And then I also think AI has some really positive influences on society as well, especially in science and medical issues. But yeah,
Yes.
it's a big threat to me. And the only way
So,
to beat it is you got to be constantly creative and new
mm,
because they can't catch up to you if you're constantly being better.
I see. So, how much research do you have to do before you work on a story?
It all depends. Most of my work is pretty light. I mean, I don't have to do it. Whereas, uh, I mean, here's one. So I did a story. I did an 800-word story on the people who design golf clubs, and golf clubs are highly technical, very complex articles, even the irons and the putters and everything. So I interviewed these guys who were mechanical engineers, um, design experts, physicists, even rocket science. Do you know rocket science goes into design of a golf ball, for example? So talking to those people, it takes a while to get the full story and kind of write it up. And so that was a couple weeks it took, but mainly it's just getting the phone calls. If you talk to people right away, you could do it in one day. Just trying to find people so you can get them to talk.
Okay. Well, if you could go back 10 years and tell yourself something, what would it be?
10 years? Oh, that's a good question. I mean, the changes, we knew the changes were coming right away in newspapers in the mid 90s, mainly because newspapers could not compete against Craigslist. That's where the newspapers lost out. They lost out in classified advertising. But as for the magazines and the publications that went away, um, even 10 years ago, I transitioned out of it and was trying to get into the corporate world. Um, the only problem, I wish I could have got, well, tell myself, I'm not really sure. I think I tried everything I could to get a permanent position in the corporate world.
Okay, well, what was the biggest mistake that you've ever made? And how did it change you as a person?
That's a good question. Um, I don't think there was ever one mistake. I think there was sometimes just being too stubborn. I was writing my own freelance business, and all of a sudden the publications went away. In 2001, there was a bad recession, and I tried to stick it out and keep working on that, and it didn't work out. And then and that forced me to go into corporate communications. So I was too stubborn into thinking I had to go find another avenue to make money.
I thought
Another
there was a lot of good
not
news in
avenue.
2001. Was
What's
there
that?
not?
2001. It was 9/11. After that came a big recession because of all the effects it had on the world. Yeah.
Wow. Dang. So when you're not working, what do you do for fun?
Play golf, walk, hike, cook.
Ooh.
Give friends of mine who I in Florida a hard time on their political views. Um, Everything. Take care of my daughters. Walk dogs.
Okay. Okay. Now, can you tell me that one story? Remember, this is a kid's show. But that one
Yes.
story, well, that you're not supposed to tell me about. Come on, you can tell me.
The one story I'm not supposed to tell you about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's only about 31 of those. It goes on and on and on about a tour operator. We're in Scotland and we're drinking the bar out of champagne, and the tour operator before met his fellow tour operator from Norway, Sig, and he says to Sig, there's no good-looking woman in Scotland. In fact, the local joke is, the Gaelic word for beautiful woman is tourist. And so we meet these women, and we're in the bar at the Turnberry Resort, and Sam, the tour operator, starts telling the story about that, and it turns out Stieg had a girlfriend who would come down and meet him at Turnberry, and Sam figured out it was her. That's who they talked about. So it's kind of like a small world moment. There's greater detail in it. Yeah. Oh, I know you. You know Stieg. How'd you know Stieg? Oh, yeah. There we go. Stieg told me about you. Oh, wow.
Well, is there anything else you think my listeners should know about you?
I tend to be honest. I try to be as honest as possible. I can be obstreperous sometimes. I can be obstreperous. It's only because I'm a big believer in the ideals of democracy and open communication. So there.
Well, do you have a Facebook or a website for my listeners who want to follow you?
You can look up Ted Johnson on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I have a small presence on Instagram. I'm not doing a lot of social media. If you need more about me, you can look me up on LinkedIn as well.
Well, what's that one question that you think I forgot to ask you?
Well, why did you do it when there was so little money?
Well, why did you do it when there was so little money?
Because it's a great job. It teaches you so much, and it's enjoyable, and it's fulfilling, and it makes you feel accomplished and respected.
Well, thank you, Ted, for being my special guest. Can you stick around for Math Corners?
Sure, Math Corners, yeah. Let's go.
Aw, Dad, my computer's slow again and I can't play my games.
Call Your Computer Solutions today, and we will scan for viruses and clean that computer up remotely and make it fast again. Our phone number is 407-826-0810.
Thanks, Dad. My computer's fast again. Now I can do my homework. Thanks for calling Your Computer Solutions at 407-826-0810.
Tiberius' favorite subject, it's Math Corners!
And now it's time for Math Corners. Thank you, Ted, for helping with Math Corners. This week, we're going to talk about some more multi-step word problems. My dad is always going to find new problems for me to solve. And today, we're going to talk about newspapers.
Uh-oh. Okay.
So, Carson was told to lay out the front page article of a newspaper. The paper used is exactly 12 inches wide and 18 inches tall, with a 1-inch margin on all sides. The article is 600 words, and Carson can use a font size 10, which is 12 square inches per 100 words, or font size 12, which is 16 square inches per 100 words. Which size font should Carson use if they want to include an 8 by 10 inch photo?
Well, the way I figure it out with the margins and everything, you only have 160 square inches, so I think you got to use the 16 words per square inch.
Okay, well, let's figure it out first. Well, first, this is a real-world problem because, all the space matters when you're limited by the size of a sheet of paper. It's not even a website.
That's right. But, in newspapers, they don't do it that way. All newspapers use the same font pretty much all the way through. They very rarely change. Maybe just for decorations and arts. Maybe the first line is in a bigger text or a font than the rest of the article. They have what's called column winches, and it was breakdown. So the basic column width was what we call 12p2, but that made it about 7 words a line. So 7 words a line was about an inch, would be about 49 words, 50 words. So then they tell you, okay, 50 words. If we want 600 words, that's 12 inches of copy. Okay, that's how you figure it out. That's why I say they slot and they plan it all out ahead of time. They tell you, okay, you're going to write the sidebar in this game. You have 600 words on George Kittle catching touchdown passes for the 49ers at this game. You lay it out ahead of time. That's how that's done.
Okay. Okay. Well,
so that kind of screws up the math question.
Okay, let's figure this out. So to solve this issue, you first have to figure out the square inches of printable area. So you have to take the 12 inches width and subtract that by 2 inches for the margin, and then you get 10 inches wide. And for the height, you do the same thing and take the 18 inches minus 2, and then you get 16 inches. Now just times that by the 10 inches wide, and you get 160 square inches of printable space. Now you have to figure out how much space is left after the photos. So you take the 8 by 10 inches, or 80 square inches, from the 160, and then you get 80 square inches left. Finally, we have to figure out the square inches of the article of each font size. Each font size is 12, is 16 divided by 100 times 600 words. That's easy. The 100 and 600 are going to be divided, leaving 16 times 6, which is 96 square inches. Uh-oh, that's too big. It will not fit in the 80 square inches. So let's try font size 10, which is 12. So 12 divided by 100 times 600 words, or as we found out using the shortcut, is 12 times 6, which is 72, which is under 80. So that is the correct font size. So the answer is size 10, and you'll have an extra 8 square inches.
Okay. But like I said, it was done differently in my day. But that's about column width and the font size. The font size never changes.
Okay, so my teacher said that I would use math every day. So how do you use math in your work?
Oh, you have to all the time. I mean, you have to figure out how far it is to get there and how to get back. You have to figure out just in your head, as you answer questions, you're constantly thinking about the next questions, the follow-up. So you kind of have to split your mind to hear what's being said and figure out how it has to go forward. So when he says, I did this, this, and this, and I hit it this far, then you have to say, well, if that far was this far, so you have to do all that in your mind as you go on. Use math all the time just to figure out distances, time, lapse, rate. So the whole thing, all the time, think about math.
Well, thank you so much, Ted, for your help with Math Corners.
I don't know if I was that much help. I was an English major, so there you go.
And now it's time for the Heart of a Lion. As you know, we talk about the qualities of living by the Heart of a Lion, which stands for leadership, integrity, obedience, and nobility. This week we're going to talk about nobility. For me, I think nobility is remembering we are God's special possessions and acting in a noble way, showing courage and honor. The qualities of nobility are goodness, virtue, honor, generosity, and selflessness. So I was at Publix getting some ice cream, and there was a long line to check out. One lady was taking a while trying to find the money in her purse for water and a protein shake. She was going to put aside the shake and just get the water because she did not have enough. Then the lady behind her grabbed $10 from her purse and handed it to the cashier. The woman was so surprised and said, "Thank you. This is truly a noble act." The lady was not looking for anything in return and was showing an example of generosity and selflessness. So, Ted, did you see or use nobility at all this week?
Well, nobility to me is being aware of those around you who may feel left out. You want to connect with them. I walk around my local community all the time, and there is a woman who is not blind, very close to being fully blind, and she sits outside in a table, and I walk by. I always ask her how she's doing. She gets by on buses on her own with a white cane. Ask her, "Deborah, are you okay? Can you need anything? Is it hot?" And invariably, we talk. One time, she was in a parking lot, and there was a semi blocking her way to get to the drugstore, and I had to walk over and grab her hand and say, "Here, it's this way." So that type of awareness of others and those in need, I think, is my sign of nobility.
Well, of all of the Heart of a Lion virtues, which is the one that you see the most?
Integrity.
Okay.
I think integrity is something I strive for every day. I mean, I think a lot of people will have disagreements with me, but they respect why I believe the way I believe and what I say. So I think that's important, integrity.
Okay. We should always try to rely on strong in everything we do, shouldn't we?
Yes, we do. Don't be afraid to say what you want to say. Don't be afraid to back it up and cite reasons. At the same time, don't be judgmental on others who may differ from you.
And that's our show, folks. I want to thank the one, the only, the amazing Ted Johnson for being on my show. It has been so much fun talking with you today. I think we learned a lot about being a freelance journalist and a communications specialist.
Good luck.
Thank you. Well, do you mind giving your social media and website again?
You can get me on Ted Johnson on Facebook, Ted Johnson of Danville, California, and LinkedIn. That's the best way to get me. Thanks a lot, Tiberius. You got a big future in this world. Good luck.
Thank you. And also, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Tiberius Show. And I would like to thank WWPR 1490 AM, K1998, Soul Radio 24/7, Easyway TV, and all the other stations that air my show. Please be sure to visit The Tiberius Show on YouTube and hit that subscribe button. Ted, have you subscribed yet?
Yes. All right. Whatever you say, jeez.
Oh, and be sure to comment if you want to be a journalist. I love finding which job kids may want to grow up and try. Also, be sure to listen to us next week on The Tiberius Show with your host, Tiberius Boy.
There you go.